broadcasting live from the Roanoke Valley of southwestern Virginia. Join us and see what life looks like from a medium's perspective with Reverend Tracey Lockwood, the medium's medium. We'll explore the tools of psychic development, hear stories and experiences from the other side, and learn to listen to our natural intuition. Now, our host, Reverend Tracey Lockwood.
Hello, beautiful lights, and welcome to another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. I am beyond excited to have today's guest on the show, and you'll see why in just a minute. But before I let you connect with her, I just wanted to remind you that I do offer private readings and private classes. I offer private mediumship development at 3 levels, and I do that live with you via Zoom. I also teach live group classes and a certification program, both in group and private training. And there is a self-study option for those of you that are just getting started. If you're interested in that, you can find out more information on my website at mediumtracylockwood.com. Well. Today I have a guest, and I'm going to tell you about her before I introduce her. She has a Bachelor's of Fine Art from the Pratt University in Brooklyn. She attended the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. She has a Master of Science in Psychological Counseling. Her artwork has been shown in New York and throughout New England, and she's taught art at several esteemed colleges and in many other venues, and she draws portraits of people's loved ones that have crossed over to the other side. She calls it the higher side of life. And so she's a spirit artist. She's also an author of Empowering Your Life with Angels, and she co-authored The Complete Idiot's Guide to Communicating with Spirits, which just tickles me. And she has studied and taught at the Arthur Findlay College in Essex, England. I got a chance to study there as well, but haven't been invited to teach yet. And she has lectured and demonstrated in a ridiculous number of venues in the U.S., Canada, and beyond. She is an ordained minister in the Spiritualist Church, and that is no mean feat in and of itself. She was pastor of the First Spiritualist Church of Quincy in Massachusetts. She is a certified medium, teaches mediumship, and I'm guessing spirit art. And she has been celebrated on many television and radio shows. And I am so tickled that I got her on this one. So welcome to the show, Rita Straus Berkowitz.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm exhausted just listening to everything I did.
Well, it was pretty impressive, and I tried to trim it down, and there just was nowhere to cut stuff. It wasn't fluffy. It was real.
Well, thank you.
For those of you that like to spy on our guests while the show is going on, you can find her at thespiritartist.com. So you can check out Rita Straus Berkowitz at thespiritartist.com. So I'm so happy you're here.
I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So I guess my first question, because this show is called From a Medium's Perspective, how has being a spirit artist and medium changed your perspective on life?
It's taken away fear. When you know and you learn this, the more you connect with spirit and you understand that it's all in divine order. You understand that we don't disappear after we pass, that we're not just stuck in a hole in the ground or in a crematorium, but in fact we are, our spirit, the energy and the essence of who and what we are continues on. And being a spirit artist, I've said in interviews that I've done before, if I haven't proven it to anybody else, I've proven it to myself that life is absolutely continuous without question.
That is actually something very interesting, because you would think that us as mediums would have that in check, but it is so amazing that we get to connect with real live people on the other side. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I know I just have to pinch myself. And there are days even when I head to a reading and I'm like, I don't know how to do this, even though I teach it too. It's like, and then I remember, it's not really me. I just have to sit back and observe.
And to experience these people in spirit, and to feel their personalities, and to bring forth their sense of humor.
Yeah.
And that lets you, because you didn't know that at all before.
No, there's no way you would get.
You have no idea, and then it comes through you, and it's one of the most magnificent feelings you can imagine.
It is just so cool. That's what I have to say. And it's such a meaningful arena to work in too. And I don't know, I think because it comes through our subconscious, maybe it just doesn't seem real to our left brain sometimes. And I'm thinking how amazing, not only to bring through the things you mentioned, and also personality and mannerisms and all that kind of thing, and memories and specific phrases and, et cetera, that build up the evidence that we have. But how amazing to draw the portraits of people in spirit. And you do that in addition to your work. How did that happen to you, child?
Okay, well, I was not interested in becoming a psychic medium. Let me start off that way. That was not my life's plan.
Mine either,
I was
but
a fine
I love
artist,
it now.
And I went to a psychic development class because a friend actually dragged me with her. And they were doing transfiguration, which is when the spirit forms in front of the face.
Yes.
And the teacher that I had at that time was trying to photograph it, but she was using an Instamatic camera, so that's how long ago it was. And, for those of you who are not aware, that was around the 1980s. So using the Instamatic camera, the image would dissipate. And I said to her, if I can see it, I can draw it. So I started to sketch. And people said, that's what I was seeing. And then, okay, nice. And then I went to the Spiritualist Church, and there was a medium there. And I love to give her credit, Barbara Farewell. She would walk around behind me all the time saying, you're going to be a spirit artist. And I said, leave me alone. I was a fine artist.
Already.
And, she kept saying it over and over and over again until I finally agreed to try it in her class. And I did 3 drawings. One was a Native American man who was a spirit guide. And for me, that's very nice, but not evidence. The second was a middle-aged man, and the third was an adolescent boy. After I drew the adolescent boy, the person that it went to took out his wallet, pulled out a photograph, laid it next to him, and said, that's my son. I can't thank you enough. And I was blown away.
Oh, I just want to cry.
And somewhat scared, because how overwhelming to realize that not only do you have this gift, but I knew it was an awesome responsibility I was given.
Yes.
And then I looked over to the person I drew the middle-aged man for, and tears were rolling down her face, and she said, this is my father. And so I knew I couldn't say, poo-poo, go away from me, to this lovely medium who kept walking around behind me, saying I was going to be a spirit artist, that I had to, in fact, give myself over to it, which is what I did.
Wow.
And then from there, I would say the rest was history.
Did you specifically train for it? It sounds like it was an utterly natural gift. Did you, I know one of the classes.
Nobody taught me, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
I never had, nobody taught me.
That's beautiful.
As a matter of fact, another medium came to me for a reading one time, and I love reading for mediums because those are always the most fun to do, because
when you have two, is easier. Yeah,
it is. When you have two people that are totally open to spirit, the loved ones and the information just comes flying in. But she said to me when she came to the reading, you were actually self-taught. And I said, I don't know who taught me. It just happened.
Yes.
And, and so, in my spiritual path, I always say spirit gives you the freedom to do exactly what they're telling you to do. So you have a lot of different paths that you can get to go there, but they've made the decision where the there is.
Yes, and I love that it isn't limited. A lot of people looking at the field of psychic mediumship as a profession or as a discipline, they assume that everybody walks the same way, everybody talks the same way, but the individual expression and different modalities that are wrapped in and laced through, the applications of it are really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I'm just putting together an advanced mediumship class, and I teach it Women of Wisdom for the School of Wisdom, and so I teach the mediumship school there. And I was thinking of all the different kinds of readings that people have done over the years when they become professional. Whether it's, the British people are very big on doing flower readings or doing ribbon readings or doing, and you must have experienced some of this when you were in Stansted, and, doing the group circles, doing transfiguration, doing trance work, doing whatever it happens to be. There are so many different ways, besides the clairs of, clairvoyance, clairaudience, and so on, that it can come through you.
Yes, the different ways that people access that information.
Right, and how are you accessing that information, and what benefit does your, shall we say, your own personality as the medium and your own way of seeing the world color the way you work? As, for instance, I'm an artist, so I became a clairvoyant first. People
because you're
that
visual. Yes, the visual.
Because I'm visual, so the visuals came in. So, you might be somebody who likes to write, and then the stories or the memory links will come in. So it's wonderful to see the different ways that people access the information, even if you are talking to the same communicator.
Yes.
If you were talking to a communicator and I was talking to the communicator, we might give totally different facts, all relating
credible,
to that one communicator, totally credible. But you might give all the stories about them, and I might give all the visual affects. And I studied psychology, so I get a lot of the personality. So I used to say I could do an intake on a lot of people's relatives because having worked in the field of psychology, you know what you're looking for, and you can then say, okay, this person had a very upbeat personality, or this person was very animated, or this person was very depressed. And, and so it can be either or, but because of the knowledge of psychology, one might go to personality affects, where, again, somebody else might go to what car they drive, or, the Brits are always wonderful in what was their address, or what was their...
not my strong suit there. I heard a talk between John Holland and John Edwards one time, and they were like, people think that the spirits come up and just give you name, address, and phone number, and they both just started raucously laughing. It was a summit thing. And, it's different for everyone. Some people tap in at the psychic end and see the aura and sense the guides, and then boom, there's a spirit, or some people just raw start with the spirit. It just, and sometimes it's the session, sometimes it's the client, sometimes it's the
Right.
focus of the client. Yeah.
And different clients will, there's different clients will bring up, not verbally, but as you're working with them, will bring up or bring out different aspects. I've many times done readings with families, and you could feel the relationship, almost like you're doing family therapy.
Yeah,
you could feel the relationship that each person has with each individual communicator.
It's very different.
And so, and that's a fascinating thing.
It is.
When that happens, because it's like, wow, here they come in, they're happy-go-lucky, they're joking, though that was my favorite uncle, but, their own kid, maybe they didn't get along that well with,
Exactly,
and you feel that, like, you feel the communicator tense up as they're going to the one that they didn't get along with versus the one that they joked around with all the time.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating.
It is fascinating. The first time that became conscious in my mind about that fact was reading for my mom. And, I know my dad. My dad talks to me in spirit, and, we had our thing, our relationship, and reading for her was so interesting because their relationship obviously was not just
very different,
that it was husband and wife, but also the it was so revealing. And I don't mean more than you want to know, but yes. I'm just saying, I just became aware of like the experience that she had as his wife was very different than the experience I had as a child. And like you said, same communicator. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that and I've mentioned this to you before when we were chatting before the show, but one of the things that I just am blown away by and extremely drawn to is the way that you use light in your paintings and in your spirit portraiture. Tell us a little bit about how, you're welcome. Tell us a little bit about why you pay such careful attention to that.
Because we are going to the light. We are moving towards the light. In our spiritual evolvement, we are taking steps, sometimes giant ones and sometimes very tiny ones, towards the light. And so what the light is doing in a particular painting, and one of the things I've really been working on is to bring you into the light in the painting. So as I've developed as an artist, I said, well, how can I, as when I do a spiritual, whether you want to call it a sermon or a lecture, how can I bring the participants into the light with me? What's the experience, as you do with a guided meditation? What's the experience to bring them into and up to the light? And that's part of what I have been really working to achieve in my paintings, is bringing the viewer into the light, to have them have the experience of wanting to enter the painting, wanting to go beyond the surface of this is the beach. Why am I looking at the beach one way versus another way? Why am I looking into the depth of the painting? So for me, bringing somebody into the depth of the painting is like connecting to the spirit, bringing them into the soul, connecting into the deepest essence of what is.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm just thinking about it in I've seen it in, just recently there was a painting that you had done of water, and it had some posts that were in the water reflected.
The pilings, yeah.
Oh, my God. And I just, it was almost like a meditative reflection that took me into the painting to where I felt like I was standing on that shore looking at the light. And I think that that's what a seasoned medium does in their readings also.
Absolutely.
Is bring the light. Yes.
One of the things that I've explained to a lot of students that are artists, as well as those who are mediumship students, is that the artist works with a media. The artist is the medium. You allow the information to flow through you. You allow yourself to get inspired as it's happening. You allow that painting to talk to you, just as the medium allows the communicator to talk to them. Mm-hmm. So in both cases, I feel strongly that mediumship is what we're doing.
Yes. Oh, definitely. I think there's a tremendous link between any creative art and the flow of spirit.
Absolutely.
Of course, we as mediums say, oh, they're working in the spirit, or they're channeling, or they're moving this through. But I think that subconscious mind that's part of each of us, that creative part of us, the, art, music, dance, writing, public speaking, etc., when it just starts flowing, that's maybe when we're in tune with truth at large, like in the matrix, but within ourself, and becoming part of that flow of love that comes in. Some people.
And isn't it in fact that? I mean, I always said, people ask me why I did it. I said I was a love junkie, why I was a medium, because that feeling of feeling all that love, so then you take it onto a slightly higher level of, connecting to the divine, connecting to the light, and bringing it back to what happens to our spirit when we cross over, in relationship to what happens to a piece of artwork, no matter what kind of art it is, whether it's visual or whether it's written or whether it's musical, that helps you to ascend to a place that is that much higher.
Yeah. And in a way, it made me think about what you said, made me think about art having a life of its own also.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is.
Wow. I would be really curious about just to hear you recant or recall, or whatever the proper term is, some of the stories, like you shared about the ones that sort of launched your awareness that you had this gift in the Transfiguration class. But are there particular stories that come to mind of, drawing or painting for clients that
absolutely. I mean, so many. I mean, one of my favorite ones is a story where a woman called me who lost a son. I connected to the son for her. I did a drawing. It looked exactly like the young man. It's on my website. The young man has a graduation cap on in that particular one. And then a year later, she called me, and when you do a whole lot of readings for people all over the world, you don't necessarily remember each one.
No, you feel the energy and you reconnect with the energy of it, but
you won't remember.
Yeah, you don't remember the name, or sometimes even
the name of the people and so on. So when I saw the name again, I didn't recognize it, and so during the reading, I said, Daniel is walking out of the water, shaking himself off like a duck. And I'm thinking to myself as a medium, I can't believe I just said the word duck in the middle of a reading. And the mother started to laugh and cry. And she said to me, this morning I went into meditation and I said, Daniel, if you're really here, get Rita to say the word duck. And all I could think of was the old Groucho Marx show when you had to guess the magic word.
Yes.
Well, he got me to say duck. And,
that's hilarious. That's so
cool.
And
when things like that happen, or when I do, there's one particular one that I remember doing where it was a phone reading, and I'm doing it for a woman somewhere in the Midwest, and I'm in my office just south of Boston, and I'm doing this drawing, and she gets it, and she sends back a photograph, and the print on the blouse was almost exactly the same as the one I drew. Now, normally, I don't even bother to put prints on the blouse.
Right, but it was significant.
Because that's not what I'm doing. I'm doing but the print on the blouse she found in a photograph. I remember doing one for Bob Olson of upspirit.com.
Oh,
and
yeah, I'm on there too.
Hi, Bob. And
you
so
probably did that toward the beginning then, if he was.
I was one of his first, yeah.
That's so.
I was one of his first. But I did a spirit drawing. His wife said to me, I had drawn his uncle when he came to interview me. And then, and I was actually the second medium he had on his, he didn't even have the site up yet. So that's how early it was. I was the second medium that he came to interview for, finding out about this because he wanted to understand it. And so, and I did the drawing and I said, this is a spirit guide. And I drew a man who looked like he was from the, and excuse my lack of history, but from the northern half of when we had our Civil War. And don't you know, his mother, and the man kept telling him to get a dog, that he needs to walk quietly in the woods with his dog. And do the drawing. And don't you know, maybe 6 months later, his mother says, is this the person that Rita drew for you? And they found a photograph taken from the 1800s of this gentleman.
Wow, that's so cool.
And it was a descendant of his who was guiding him. And that's happened more than once, where a descendant has become a guide, which I find fascinating also. Because that doesn't always happen. It doesn't happen.
Continue to supervise their lineage, I guess, or to be part of it.
Right, yeah. And then to make sure that, they're going in the right direction. And probably because Bob was so interested in spirit communication, that he was very willing to come through with the ability to be proven. Because that tells the sitter more than anything else, this is real.
Yes.
This is real. This is not just a story that she's making up with a pretty picture. This is real. This is the man that she drew for me.
Yes,
he matches.
And it gives them, I've always appreciated spirit art, and I've always appreciated even precipitated spirit art, because it leaves the person with something to reflect on during times of weakness or downtime or questioning or, not feeling their best. And just to remind them of that reality is really so special. So special.
It's really the gift that keeps on giving, because, I know that I've worked with mothers who have lost children, and as I'm sure you have. And that to me, being a mom myself, is the most heart-wrenching kind of reading to do. And yet they can look at that drawing that they know I knew nothing of before it came out on the piece of paper, and know there was no way she could have known that.
Yes.
If in fact this was not coming from someplace.
Exactly.
And so, that is such comfort to someone.
It is most definitely.
So I feel very honored that I was permitted to do it for the 35 years I was doing it.
Yeah. Well, I know that you're not taking appointments for that type of thing anymore, but you are still teaching.
I am still teaching, yes.
Yes. And I guess one thing that would be curious to people, it's always interesting to find out, how does the evidence build, or how do the details come to you, or how do you, some people have this idea that a clairvoyant medium is one who sees people as if they're real people walking in, like real as in living people walking in the room. And there are some that do see it that clearly. For me, it just sort of is like, I think of it like emulsion photography, and there I go dating myself. But I remember working with my dad in the the dark room under red light and watching images come up in the chemical bath.
What a nice way to put it. I like that.
Yeah, and it's like
that one. That was good.
It's
yeah.
So for you,
it does.
For you, what is
it appears?
like?
It happens to me in different ways, and I wish I could say it was the same each time. It's not. There are times that I will see a hologram walking around the office or the room or wherever it happens to be. There are times that I have been on stage where I have my large white pad and I hear just trust. Just trust.
Yes.
And, there's one funny story that I have to share with you is there was a man coming through from Spirit who had an amazing sense of humor. And the hardest thing for an artist to do is to start at the bottom of the face and draw up. Well, don't you know, he started with his chin. And I said, oh, my God. And he started with his chin, and it was as if I was unpeeling something, and the face was going from the bottom up as I was sketching. So we went from the chin to the mouth, to the nose, to the eyes, to the hairline, to the actual hair. And I could hear the man, as I was doing the reading, laughing the entire time. And I said, I don't remember what the connection was, the relationship was of the reading, but that this man had just the most incredible sense of humor, and he loved to put people on the spot with his sense of humor, lovingly, but loved to do that. And so that's how
it was part of his personality. Yeah.
It was part of his personality. So that's how he portrayed that to me, going from the chin and working up versus drawing the shape of the head or starting with the eyes. Normally, what they will show me first is the eyes when I'm doing the drawing. Normally, the cliche eyes are the mirror to the soul. Absolutely. Without question. And the look in the eyes and the expression in the eyes and the emotion that's in the eyes will come through as relating to that particular person. And there was one time at the very beginning of my career when somebody asked me for a past life drawing, which is also another fascinating thing to do. And what I saw was that she was one of the spectators at the crucifixion. And in the drawing I did for her, her eyes were closed. Well, doing something like that, you never forget.
Yes.
That moment. She came back maybe 3 or 4 years later, and she said, I want you to look at the drawing. Do you remember what it was? I said, yes, she was standing there with your eyes closed. Because, again, you didn't forget that one. And the eyes were opened.
Oh, wow.
The eyes were there on the drawing. And it was framed under glass.
Yeah, the work itself transfigured.
The work itself transfigured.
How beautiful. How beautiful. I love that aspect to spirit portraiture, if it's done well, because there is that kind of element of transfiguration.
Right.
It's so interesting. That's where you discovered talent, was in a class on transfiguration.
Yeah. And people will say, well, it wasn't a class on transfiguration. It was a client that came.
Oh, I meant originally, like in your beginning.
Oh, originally, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And so it's, again, you're experiencing these things. And, since we are on live radio, I'll say, holy camole.
Yes,
you see these things happen and you say, am I really experiencing this? Am I really seeing this?
Yes.
And, and how it's coming across is so overwhelming that you can't do anything but do it.
Yes, there is that drive that comes along with that connection. It's like you might not feel like you're going to be able to speak for that, but it's going to come through your lips, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Not that we don't have our will involved. I'm not trying to make it sound like scary in any way whatsoever. It's not.
No,
but It's like a
that's very
drive to release it.
magnificent.
Yes. Yes, it is. And it's really brave and courageous to do what you do. And some people might not think of that, but I think of it true also for particularly demonstration mediums, but also those that work privately, to be able to speak what's coming through your subconscious, because it feels so random sometimes. And
it does, and it's trust with a capital T. And that's what I tell my students from
Yes.
day one. It is trust with a capital T. You really have to be able to trust. And if you don't trust, you're going to question. And once you question, you lose it.
That's right. Yep. I just actually said almost the same thing in a private class this week, because you can start playing with your own head. Like, did I make that up? No, you didn't.
Absolutely.
It was brought to your memory because it's something familiar. So just keep looking or feeling or sensing or allowing it, and keep going with it, because it will make sense if you go deep enough.
And I've said to students ad nauseum, and I will say that ad nauseum, this is not spirit wait and listen, this is spirit communication. If you're showing me chocolate pudding, I'm going to ask you, why are you showing me chocolate pudding?
Right, who's showing it, or what's the significance?
Oh, right, yeah, what's the significance of it? Why are you showing me the chocolate pudding? What does it relate to? And it could be something as mundane as chocolate pudding.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But if you fed your father chocolate pudding every night while he was in the hospital before he passed, that chocolate pudding means something.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that differentiates the level of someone's ability as a medium is just seeing the image, which is correct.
Yes,
or
absolutely.
Being able to make the connection for the client rather than the client make the connection for you.
Exactly.
Don't say.
I got, again, I got twinges when you said that. That's absolutely perfect. That you're making the connection for the client. You're not saying, and we've all seen many clients, do you understand chocolate pudding? Versus, I'm seeing chocolate pudding, going back to the communicator, asking the communicator, why are you showing this to me? And he or she gives you a full story about what that means between the sitter and them.
Yes, yeah, and I think that that differentiates that question that we are allowed to ask or should ask, and just keeping a connection, because we're not connecting just to spirit. We're also creating a connection to our clients. So we have to be aware of
it's a triangle. Exactly.
Right. But, we can say, does that resonate with you? But that's not the right. You don't say, does that resonate with you if you get a symbol, because because
without the rest of the spirit doesn't mean anything. Right, exactly.
Right. But if you get a description, or you get an emotional impact, or you get you start going into the detail of the evidence, then it's okay to say, does that resonate with you? Just to check in with them, make sure that they're receiving it, that they're on page, because they're sometimes listening with their left brain. They may be skeptical, or they may have they may just be trying to understand. Usually people are just trying to understand what you're saying, because they don't see, hear, feel, and know what we do.
Exactly the same. Do. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So they're just, and so touching in with them a little bit to make sure that they're on board.
You were talking about stories and, and what we're talking about before. When you're giving a reading to somebody and you say your father loved to watch you play when you were little, of course, we could say
most, some
but
not.
If I said your father liked to watch you play jacks when you were little.
Exactly.
And I remember having that come up in a reading where I actually felt like I was playing jacks in the middle of the reading.
Isn't it so precious? I always consider it just like I always, when I was younger, felt honored when someone would bare their soul and ask my opinion or share a personal story. And now as we, work, it's so amazing that we get to, it's an honor because we get to share actually the most important, seminal, vital parts of people's lives, because they come in need, like if they don't come in need, that's why I don't do demonstration mediumship. I could give 2 pennies for what somebody thinks about my ability, but I do very much care that they walk out with a transformation when they go out of the reading or the door, that they have clarity.
It's about healing.
Yes, about healing.
It's about healing.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah, we have a thing that we say in spiritualism: every medium is a healer. And that's the purpose of it. That's
even just said, because that's how I feel about it. I feel like I actually turned down a reading last night that someone had prepaid for their so-and-so to come get a reading, because she called and she said, well, I was supposed to write down what I wanted to focus on, and I really can't think of anything. And I thought, then why are you talking to me?
You don't need a reading right now, yeah.
Then I said, my purpose is to help people navigate their lives better and, find closure. And there's a purpose to what I do. I don't just do it gratuitously. And she released it, I released it, and somebody else will enjoy that,
Yeah. But sometimes I had a woman that got a gift certificate for her husband as a Christmas present, and made an appointment for him, happened to be St. Patrick's Day. And on St. Patrick's Day, he was the second youngest of 14 children of a good Irish Catholic family.
Oh,
and he was already 60. So needless to say, not only were some of his siblings in spirit, and his parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and so on, because it was that large a family. And these people literally were standing in line like it was a deli line, and I will have to say it that way, coming in one after another. And I told him after the reading, thank you so much. I had the best time meeting your family.
Yes, it's like a party. Yes, it's like a family reunion or something. But you're included. It's like you get the food
you're
too.
Included, exactly. Exactly. I mean, there was one time, and it's a fascinating story. One time I was asked to come to someone's home, and their son had passed in 9/11. So I was expecting to go to one of the more somber, happy to do it, to serve, but one of the more somber, depressing. I get in there, and it was like I was there for Christmas dinner. I could see what people were holding from the buffet table on their plate. I could see who was eating. I have what's called clairgustance, so I get to taste.
Yes.
But I could see what the different things that they were tasting. As we are going through the time being in their house, physical phenomena was happening. Auditory physical phenomena and visual physical phenomena happened twice. And then when I asked them if I could write the story in my book, the Idiot's Guidebook. I wrote the story. They bought a copy of the book. And you know how sometimes paper can have a strange crease in it?
Uh-huh.
On the page that was the page that was their story about their son was that crease in the paper through the page.
Oh, wow.
And I called the producer of the book, and she told the publisher of the book, and everybody in the publishing office was like freaking out that this happened, because they had never seen a crease in the page in any of their books.
Oh, that's true.
And it was not like a crease bending the corner down. It was almost a vertical with a slight wave in it crease that went from the top to the bottom of the page, because she came and showed me the book afterwards.
Oh, you do teach, and you have a vast experience working in the field. A lot of our listeners are, some are starting out, but some are a little further in their development than just basic stuff. Would you be willing to share maybe a little exercise or something that they could do on their own or with a friend that might be helpful in developing their ability? Maybe particularly spirit art or not, either way, whatever comes in mind.
Spirit art, I found although I do give a class in spirit art when we do the School of Wisdom, that most people are very nervous about actually doing the drawings. So I will say, as far as doing the drawings, it's no different than doing mediumship. You let your hand go, and you let spirit take over. You know, it's like that song, "Let Jesus Take the Wheel." I say, let spirit take the pen, and let it happen.
Yeah.
As far as developing, you know, I would say practice, 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 practice. One of the things that is a fun exercise to do for somebody at the beginning of their path is to ask a friend for a photo album and then start to talk, because we're all spirit, whether we're here or there, start to talk about the people in each one of the photographs.
Tell the story.
And then tell the story that you're picking up about each person in the photographs in their album. I did scare one of my daughter's ex-boyfriends very much that way. He brought over his photo album, and I told him about everybody in it. And they go, "Oh my God, how do you know this?" But,
I always laugh because we're psychic. Just kidding, you know,
exactly.
like in a humorous, in a light way.
And, and I also say to them when we're doing it as a practice, because in my very beginning classes, I do that as an exercise. And I say, just because somebody has a smile on their face doesn't mean they're happy. In the photograph. Just because, so don't get fooled by what you're seeing. Don't go into your left brain and try to figure it out. This is, and so if you see a piece of jewelry that looks more childlike, don't assume that it belonged to a child. If you see, and one of my favorite ones was, I had a pendant that belonged to somebody named Paul. Now, on the back of it, it said, "With all my love, Paul." But because in the 60s, men wore medallions as pendants, and they don't now, that if I took it out in a class, even 10 years ago, they assumed it belonged to a woman. Well, we know what assuming does. So in mediumship, that is expressed that much more, because when you start to assuming, you're going into your intellectual brain, into your left brain. Do not do that.
Yeah, and learning that margin, is really, I think that's part of discerning spirits. I think that's part of integrity, like personal reading integrity, to be able to feel that point. Like, spirit will give you symbols that relate to something that went on in your life. And sometimes those are to provide a textural template, but don't continue to assume that it's the same all the way through. Like, don't just stop thinking and go, yeah.
And I want to share with you, because this is a very, a very funny and wonderful story. I had a student whose father passed away, and she came to get a drawing and a reading, and I did the drawing, and she was very happy with the drawing. And then she said, but before, she said, "My father will never come through. He was a scientist. He didn't believe in any of this." I said, "Well, let's not set that as, a premonition, or let's just go with the fact that if you're here, chances are he'll want to come and chat with you." Well, not only did he come and chat, and the drawing was validated, but he said to me that the reason why, when you start to analyze what you're seeing clairvoyantly, the image goes away, or when you see spirit out of the corner of your eye and you look towards it and you try to understand what it is, it goes away. It's because that's when you've switched from your right brain to your left brain. That's when you've gone from the intuitive to the intellectual. And that's why the image goes away. So this scientist actually taught me a lesson while I was giving her the reading.
That is the best. That is the best. Yeah.
Isn't that? So, so I found it fascinating that her father, who was a scientist, while he was living on the earth plane when he went to the higher side, was in fact still wanting to teach the science of what was happening. And I said, that's perfect.
And that alone was evidence that he's alive and kicking over there.
Right. Very definitely alive and kick and still teaching. So, yes.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think you can help it. I think that's it. I
no,
mean,
you can't.
Even if you never spoke another word, Rita, I think that your work would teach for you.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and I don't just mean.
And I want to share one
done,
story. I know that we're coming,
Yeah, we may have a minute to 2 minutes left. Go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things I love about being a medium is when my own people come to me.
Mm-hmm.
And about 2.5 years ago, I was in the throes of cancer treatments and not feeling all that well. And my mother was very definitely, she had a very distinct personality and she was very definite. And so that morning, my sister and my brother and, we're all texting back and forth. It was the Jewish holidays and, they were all getting together and they were all saying, does anybody have Mommy's rice pudding recipe? And I said, I don't have it, but, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, in front of me, typewritten on a piece of yellowed paper, was the recipe. And I heard my mother's words saying to me, you watched me do it so many times, why do you need a recipe?
Oh,
and then she presented the recipe to me. I made it. And then sent the recipe to my brother. He made it where the family was getting together. And they all called me that night, passed the phone around the table. They're all laughing and crying. And that's when you know people have been touched by spirit, when they're laughing and crying together. And laughing and crying and saying, I can't believe you have this recipe. Because they had been looking for it for a long time.
That is just tremendous. Just absolutely tremendous.
You asked at the beginning, why is it so special to be doing this work? Because our loved ones come to us. And we don't have to think it's our imagination.
That's right. Yes. And I hope for everyone listening out there that you realize that if you do sense someone in spirit, that they're there and it's okay.
They're there. Talk to them.
Yeah. Think even in your mind. Yes, they can hear your thoughts.
Just mind to mind. You don't have to talk out loud. Mind to mind. Nobody has to think you're crazy. Just communicate with them. They're coming to communicate with you. That's the purpose of them.
Yes. Rita, thank you so much for our listeners.
Oh, my pleasure.
You've been a gem and a joy. If you are interested in studying with Rita or just seeing her beautiful artwork, you can find her at thespiritartist.com. And for all of you out there, remember, it's never inappropriate to be kind, and without integrity, you have nothing. See you next week.